Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm James, continuing on with this Balsa USA Stingray 120 build. So in this video, I want to start building the fuselage. In the previous videos, I worked on the wing. I got the wing mostly constructed, and then I also worked on the tail sections. But as mentioned, I'm going to go ahead and start on the fuselage, and we'll see how far we can get. So the first thing I need to do is take the parts out, and then I'll kind of go over them as I'm taking them out to show you sort of the way it's going to work, and I'll go over sort of the method that I'm going to be using. One thing I wanted to point out is the fuselage is actually pretty long. It's longer than 4 feet, which is longer than my building board, these ceiling panels that I'm using. So I took another I took another panel and I cut it and I just attached it on the end over here. So now I have a long enough work surface. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Let me set these other pieces aside for now. We'll come back to these. Okay, so to start with, we have the fuselage is going to have this outer panels, which are this balsa sheeting here. And there's a front portion, as you can see here, and then there's a rear portion here, and they get glued together. So let me go ahead and take these out, and we'll sort of take a look at those. This one's already kind of fallen out of the wood here. Alright, so there's going to be several steps in construction of the fuselage. And the fuselage itself is a relatively simple structure. It's just sort of like going to be like this boxed kind of frame structure. And the instructions have you build it straight on your building board without building it on top of the plans. But I will need the plans set down at some point so I can make some measurements. But in any case, let me show you how it's going to start. So I have these two pieces that are going to be sort of fused or glued together here along this seam. Probably just going to use like a thin CA or a thick CA just to kind of get those stuck together. And then on top of that, we start putting our doublers. These are plywood doublers. And these are going to go, one's going to go right about here. And then I have one up here for the front, sort of like the engine compartment's going to go right about here. And, you know, the instructions say to use a thick CA. But, you know, again, you know, for big pieces like this, even though thick CA does take a little bit longer time to cure than a thin CA, I'm not usually that comfortable trying to put a large piece on this. I'm just using thick CA because I need a little bit more time. So I'm just going to go ahead and use an epoxy. I could use like a water-based wood glue like I've done before, but I really don't want to take a chance of this warping in any way. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my epoxy like I mentioned. So okay, so I have my two doublers down like this. And then of course from there, we have our firewall. I think this is about a 3/8 inch piece of plywood firewall. It's really beefy. This is going to go right up here, obviously like right about here. And then we have a couple formers or bulkheads. I think this one is going to go, this is the F4 or F2. This one's going to go right here. It's going to go right behind where the landing gear blocks are going to be set, like right in here. And then I have one that's going to go right back here, sort of like right behind the wing. And then from there, we're going to put some longerons or longerons, and these are going to just be glued along the edges out here. So I'm going to build two sides, and then once I get the two sides built up, we're going to go ahead and put them together and start forming that box structure. All right, and I also have a few other little parts right here. I have this little thin piece of plywood, and this is going to go right in this little cutout right here. And what this is for is it's going to sort of reinforce and kind of protect that balsa panel in there from the landing gear wire. Now the kit comes with pretty thick piano wire for the landing gear, and then the landing gear plugs in to these little blocks, these kind of hardwood blocks, which then also sit inside here like that. So the thing is though, I'm going to go ahead and construct it that way, but as I mentioned before, if you remember, I'm going to not use the wire landing gear. I'm actually going to be using just a solid sort of like a landing gear that I'm going to go ahead and purchase separately, because I like the way that looks over just a kind of the simple sort of skinny landing gear like that. So I'm going to go ahead, when I get there, we'll deal with that. But for now, I am going to go ahead and put these blocks in, because it's not going to hurt to have them there. And it will also, you know, help strengthen the fuselage, because they will be there. And then lastly, I have this little thin piece of wood here, which is actually going to be at the tail section back here. When we pinch the tail section together, this piece is going to be sort of what they go up against, and it's going to set the width of the end of the tail. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all my little T-pins here, and I'm going to sort of make a little fence around the outside along the edge of my balsa sheets here, like this. If this makes sense. I'll put a few in now, and I'm going to put these on so that when I put the doubler on, just going to go like right here, those will help kind of keep it bracketed, if you will, up against the balsa sheet, and hopefully everything will be lined up. It won't be, you know, crooked like this. Hopefully I'll have these pins in here all around the outside, just kind of holding everything nice and straight like that. Okay, well that looks like it worked out okay. So as you can see, I have these little pins, and I'm going on this side over here and look down on it over here, and if you can see them. And the pins, just like I said, they kind of help just brace everything and keep everything lined up. So as you can tell, I put the epoxy on, and I just smeared it on with my finger, had the glove on, and I just set it right down on top of there, and I put the weights on it to hold it down. The reason I'm doing it in this orientation right now, because I sort of flipped it over, is because these doublers are a little bit kind of warped. They're sort of like this, and so I decided to go ahead and put them down, straight down like this, so they would flatten out instead of having them kind of curved the other way. So anyhow, that's just something you have to kind of contend with when you're building kits like this that are made out of wood. You have to kind of deal sometimes with parts being a little wonky on you. Before I put the doubler in the engine compartment, I have to do a few other steps. One of them is I have these little blocks, which are going to be right like this, and those are the wing mounting bolts go into those blocks. And then what I need to do after that is I'm going to put the longerons on along both sides here. And the thing what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using this bulkhead, this number F5 is going to be sitting like this, and I'm just going to put it on there temporarily so I have that to sort of line up the longeron like that, and then I'll glue it on. I'll take this out and I'll just glue it on. And then the other thing I need to do is this block is, because the block is square or rectangular and this is at an angle, as you can see, I have to just trim this block, put a little angle in that block so that it's going to be flush with this former right here. Okay, so I'm just going to take this block, I'll put it on here, and I'm going to mark on it this point right there. I'll just mark it real quick on here, like that. And then I need to draw a straight line across it, like so. And then that line is going to meet sort of the corner or the edge out here, like that. And that'll put that little angle in there for me. Not very much. That'll be just like that. All right, and I'll just use my razor saw and hopefully I can get this. It's a very small amount. I'm just going to go ahead and try to trim it, and then I'll probably have to sand it or maybe use my X-Acto blade to kind of get it cleaned up. Okay, and this will go something like this. And then, of course, like I said, this guy will go right up against here like that. Okay. I think I got to trim a little bit more off of here. All right, so since this is going to be the wing mounting block, I'm going to be using this is just Bob Smith Industries 30-minute epoxy, which is stronger generally than a 5-minute epoxy. Again, I'm going to be using this F5 former as just a guide so I know where to set the longerons. So these are going to go right up against here like this. I'm not sure why you don't glue this in now, but following the instructions. So I have two of these. I have one to put over here and one to put over here. So let me just go ahead and put this one on first it's going to be with a thick CA. The top one is going to be straight. It's going to be a 90-degree angle between the two. So that's just going to go straight up against it. But the bottom one, there's a little bit of an angle to it because the bottom of the fuselage is kind of curved. So I'm going to go ahead and trim a little bit off the end so that it meets nicely with that F5 former. Not a lot. Something like that. One thing I like to do, if I remember, is I like to kind of set up some pins in my building board like this so they're easy to get out instead of trying to fish them out of my little container here while I'm trying to get everything lined up and the glue is curing. I'll just put some of these out to get them ready to go. All right, well, I'll tell you what, you can't let your guard down when you're using a CA. I don't even care if it's the thick. It does, even this was a little trying to get it, make sure everything was lined up before it's set up. So in any case, again, following the instructions, they're telling you to use the thick CA a lot. And anyhow, so let me go ahead and pull this off of here. All right, so we'll let this cure up and then we'll move on to our next step. Now I get to move on to the firewall. So here is the firewall piece. This is a 3/8 inch piece of plywood. And you notice that it's square on the bottom, but then it's angled right on top. That's because the top of the fuselage has that angle in it. So one thing to note is that my fuselage is upside down relative to the way you're looking at it. So the firewall is going to go on just like this. Now the thing is where this angle is, that's going to be lined up right at the top of the fuselage. So it's going to go on here right about there. So, but to help me kind of line it up while I'm gluing it, I'm just going to go ahead and mark that using my pen here. And that will help me as I'm lining it up. Because it's kind of hard to see where that angle is because of the way that this is laser cut. You can kind of see that dark, kind of where it's burned. So I'm going to go ahead and just mark it. And that'll help me when I'm lining it up. Just like that. And you can see when I do this, I can just put it right on that edge. So I'm going to use my 1, 2, 3 blocks, these heavy blocks, to keep the firewall at 90-degree angles to the fuselage side. And I just wrapped them with a little bit of plastic wrap so that they don't actually get glued to the plane. And then once again, because it's a little bit stronger and it's going to be using a 30-minute epoxy on this, all right, so the firewall is now set. I'll let it sit overnight and let it cure. It takes about 8 hours for the 30-minute epoxy to cure up. And so I'll just come back tomorrow and we'll take a look at it. And then one thing to know, I do have some weights on here. I use the 1, 2, 3 blocks again to keep it nice at a 90-degree angle. And because the 1, 2, 3 blocks are very heavy, I can clamp them up against the firewall and the whole thing is just sitting down nice and snug on top of the building surface. And I do have an extra weight here sort of pushing it back up against the doubler here. So the doubler is right here and the firewall is up against that doubler and everything's just kind of held in place there. Okay, so we'll come back later and we'll take a look. All right, so I'm back, and now let's go ahead and take this apart and we'll see how it came out. Pull the clamps off. These guys may be a little bit stuck on here. Yep, not too bad. That's good. Okay, there we go. So I want to check it real quick to see how it came out. See how my angle is there. It looks pretty good using my square. All right, so this side is finished for now. So what I'm going to do is off camera, I'm going to go ahead and finish constructing the other side. All right, so I've been going back and forth in my head about whether if I want to use the landing gear that comes with the kit, which is the wire landing gear, or if I want to buy sort of a solid set from a different source. I've been having a little bit trouble finding one that's going to be the right size. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and build it as if I'm going to be using the wire landing gear, and then I can decide later if I want to change it out. So next step is to go ahead and put these blocks in. So the blocks have to be oriented. The blocks are going to be in here like this, sitting straight down like that, and then the wire goes inside of the block. You push the wire in, and that's what holds it, and then they go down like this. So these two guys have to be in here, but they have to be in opposite. You can't put them like this. You have to put them like that, because one wire is going to go on one side and the other wire is going to go on the other side. So this one will go like this, for example, and then this one will flip the other way and go like that. And I'm just going to epoxy those in. So the fuselage sides are now complete, and the next step is going to be to attach the remaining formers and then attach the two fuselage sides together. But I'm going to go ahead and wait until my next video on this. So until then, thanks for watching my channel. I always appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.